Hello Divination and welcome. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you step by step how to create full screen sections with top and bottom scroll links with Divi. This is the final design we're aiming to achieve. So without wasting a lot of time, let's dive in and let's get started. Okay, so right now I'm in the admin dashboard of my website. So the first thing we need to do is to create a brand new page. So I'm going to come over here to pages and click on add new. So the name of the page can be anything. So you can go ahead and just name it whatever you want. But in my case, I'm just going to call this Mac. Click on use the Divi builder, and then I'm going to go straight into the visual builder. Next, we need to add a full width section. So I'm going to come over here, click this plus button, and I'm going to click on full width. So this, what we need here is the full width header module. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. So now that we have all that in place, I'm just going to go ahead now and save. And then on the top here, we can see by default, we have this section. So let's go ahead and delete it because we're not going to need it. Okay, so now we need to go into the module settings and start adding our background images and the rest of the information. So I'm going to click here on the gear icon. And then the first thing we need to do here is to add our title. So I'm going to paste my title in here. Next, I'm going to add my subheading text. So I'm going to paste it again. Okay, so now that we've added our subheading text, we need to get rid of this content text. So I'm going to delete that. And then the next stage now is to add our images. So I'm going to come over here to images, but the image we need to add is the header image URL. So the image is going to be on the right side of this information. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to click this plus button here. And the image I need is an image of a laptop, which is right here. So I'm going to select it. Now, make note, this needs to have a width of 800 pixels. So just make sure that these are your dimensions. Otherwise, it won't look right. And also, if you haven't uploaded your images into the media library, what you want to do is to first upload them from wherever you download them from. So this could be maybe Pixabay or Unsplash or even our images from our layout packs, but the size needs to be 800 pixels. Okay, so now I'm going to click on upload an image. And now you can see it has been added on the right side, which is exactly what we need. Now, the next thing is to add our background image. So to do that, we need to come over here to background, and then we're going to choose the third tab. So I'm going to click here and click the plus button. Again, my image is in the media library. So I'm just going to scroll down and find that image, and it is right here. Now, this image has dimensions of 1920 by 1283, but the most important thing is it needs to be about 1920 because that really fills up the width of our section. So let me go ahead now and click upload an image, and now we can see our image has been applied to the background. Now we need to do more customization. So let's go over here to the design tab. So under the design tab, we need to go into text and logo and make sure that it's all centered. So I'm going to come over here to layout and then make sure that this is centered just by doing that. Next, we need to make this full screen. So I'm going to select full screen. And then the next stage now is to show the scroll down icon. So I'm going to click here and we are going to give it a color. So right now the size is 50 pixels. That should be okay. And we might as well make some adjustments for the other devices. So I'm going to click here and go to the tablet, and for the tablet size it needs to be set at 30. So I'm just going to enter it in here like that, and that should be fine as well for our smartphones. So I'm going to click back on the desktop. Next, I'm going to add an overlay to this so that it's easier to read. So I'm going to click here on overlay, and for our background color overlay, I'm going to click here on this eyedropper tool and add my value in here. Now this value is going to be an RGBA, so all I need to do now is to drag this second slider down a little bit and then paste my value between the brackets. Now, if you want the exact same value that I'm using here, you can find it in the post, which I will link to in the show notes below. So that's the color I'm going to use for our overlay. Now we need to go and add our text size. So I'm going to come over here to text, and we're going to set our text at 5 VW. Okay. And that's for the desktop. For the smartphone, we need to set it at 32 pixels. So I'm going to click this little tab right here and click on the tab, on the tablet tab, and then paste my value in here. And that needs to be also the same for the smartphone. Great. So back over here to my desktop view. Now you may be wondering why I've used the value of VW for the title text. So the reason why I do that is because the value will make sure that the text adjusts to the browser size, adding a pixel value for the smartphone will make sure that the text doesn't scale down too small. Right, so for the next thing we need to do now is to add a CSS ID. So I'm going to come over here to the Advanced tab, come over here to CSS and ID, and the CSS ID we need to add is just the number 1, just like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some customizations. So this CSS will allow the section below to link back up, but this will be added later on in this tutorial. Okay, so now that I have all that in place, we need to go ahead and save our settings. Now, what you also may do is to make further adjustments. Like as you can see right now, I have elegant design on 2 lines. So you may want to go in and make those customizations. So let me just go in and make sure that it's all in 1 line. So to go back into my settings, I need to click on this gear icon, and then I'm going to go into design, title text, and just make this slightly smaller like that. Okay, so in my case now, 4VW works fine because that enables me to have this in a single line. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save now. Now it's time to create our second section. So to save us time, what we're going to do is we're just going to duplicate this. So I'm going to come over here all the way to the top and click on this button here. So like that. And then now we have the same design. So all we have to do now is to go in and make just a few changes. So the first thing we need to do is to go into our module settings. So I'm going to come over here, click on the gear icon. So now I'm in the module settings. So the second thing we need to do is to add our title. So this is the title that we're going to add. And then on the button text, we need to add some button text called learn more. So I'm going to come over here. So instead of having it as click here, we're going to have it as learn more. Okay. So now our button is showing. Next, we need to add our content. So for our content, I'm just going to paste it here in this area. Right, so for button 2 to appear, all we need to do is to add the space bar. So now you can see that the button now is showing. But right now, we don't need to do anything to this. So next, I'm going to come over here to my link. So this is where we want to come to our button 2 URL and paste this. So we need the £sign and 1. Now it's time to make our design customization. So I'm going to click on the design tab. Next, I'm going to come to layout, and this time we are going to make sure that the text and logo orientation is set to left. So now this is now side by side. Next, we need to go into our overlay. So I'm going to click here on overlay and click the eyedropper tool. And this time we're going to add a different color here for our overlay. So I'm going to paste my value between the brackets. And as I mentioned before, if you want to use the exact same values, you can go to the post, which I'll link to in the show notes below. Right, next we need to add our title text size. So I'm going to click here on title text. So by default, it's set to 4VW because that's the value that we had from the previous section. So I'm just going to click here once and set it to 3VW. So for the tablet, it's going to be the same thing. I'm going to set it again at 3VW. Great. Now it's time to go into the buttons. So we're going to start off with button 2. So I'm going to click here on button 2. So in order for us to make customizations to button 2, we need to activate use custom styles for button 2. So here I'm going to click it and it's going to say yes. And we're going to start off with the size. So I'm going to make sure my size is set to 50. And for the for the smartphone, it needs to be set at 30. So I'm going to click here on this little tab and then click on the smartphone tab and set this to 30, just like that. Back over here to my desktop. Now we need to adjust our border width. So right now it's set at 2. We need to just make sure it's set to 0. Okay, so we need to scroll down until we find show button 2 icon. So by default, it's set to yes. We need to set this to no. Next, we need to set our color for our hover background. So I'm going to click here on this eyedropper tool. And then we are going to add our RGBA value. So my value is just pretty much going to be full transparency. So I'm going to drag the slider all the way down until we get all zeros. Now we need to add our button 2 icon. So I'm going to scroll back over here to the top and we're going to find our icon. So first of all, I need to activate show button 2 icon. So I'm going to select to say yes. And then I'm going to choose this one right here. Right. So the next thing we need to do is to customize our button 1. So let's go ahead and do that. So just going to scroll all the way here and close this for button 2. And I'm going to select button 1 and activate the custom styles. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is to start off by adding our text color size. So I'm going to paste it in here. like that. So you can see here it's become really massive, but we're gonna adjust it. So for the smartphone, it needs to be set at 16 pixels. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to click this little icon here and click on smartphone, and then I'm going to paste my value just like that. So now you can see the button has become a bit smaller. So back over here to my desktop. Next, we need to add our button 1 a background color. So I'm going to come over here, click this plus button to add our background color, and I'm going to paste my hexadecimal value just like that. Next, it's time to add our border color. So again, I'm going to click here on this little icon, paste our color, and then scroll down until I find where it says show button 1 icon. Now we don't need that, so I'm going to say no to that. So now when I mouse over it, we don't have any icons showing up, which is great. So the next thing we're going to do here is to add our custom padding. So I'm just going to collapse our button 1 settings. So our padding can be found over here on spacing. Right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add padding of 7 VW, but this is going to be both to the left and the right. So we can activate this chain, and the value I'm going to add here will be applied to both sides, just like that. Next, we need to add our CSS ID, and to do that, we need to come over here to the Advanced tab, click on CSS ID, and this time over here, because we duplicated it, it has 1 in there by default, but we need to change this to 2. Now we also need to add some CSS code. So I'm going to come over here to the CSS tab. So we're going to start off by adding our code in the header container, and this is the width of 100%. The next code is in button 2. So I need to scroll down until I find button 2, and here it is. Paste this code. Now, if you want to use this exact code, the CSS code, this can be found in the post, which I'll link to in the show notes below. Okay, so this CSS code we've just entered here should allow us to see our button positioned right here in the top. But you can see here that it's only showing when I hover this area. That is because I haven't set the setting correctly. So let's go back over here to our design and click on a button 2. So what we need to adjust here is to make sure that our show button 2 icon is set to no. So I'm going to click here. So what we need to do is to come over here where it says only show icon on hover for button 2. So let's set it to no. So now we can see that it's now showing, okay, which is great. And when we click on it, this should take us to the first section. So now let's go ahead and save, because it's now time to create section 3. So I'm going to save changes. And as we did before, I'm just going to duplicate section 2. So I'm going to come over here and click this button like that. So now I've duplicated it. Next, we need to come into our module settings. So I'm going to click the gear icon, and now I'm in the module settings. Right, so our title here needs to be changed to the city. So I'm going to paste it in here like that. Next, we need to add our link to button 2. So I'm going to come over here to links. So we want this to link to the section above. So this is going to be 2. So I'm going to paste 2 in here and get rid of 1, which was there before. So next, you can upload your background image, but in this case, I'm going to use the image that I have right now in the background. So I'm just going to leave it as it is. Right, so now that we've decided to use the same image, we also need to do some customizations in the background option. So I'm going to come over here to background, and we're going to make sure that background image size is set to cover, and then our background image blend needs to be set to multiply. So I'm going to come all the way down here and change my image blend to multiply. So it's close to the top. I'm going to select it. Right, next we need to add our background color overlay. So to do that, we're going to come over here to the design tab, and over here on overlay, I'm going to select overlay, and we're going to add our color. So I'm going to click this eyedropper tool, and my color is an RGBA value. So I'm going to highlight this and just paste my new value in here. So you can see here by applying that color, it has changed the design of my background. Next, we're going to go to our title. So I'm going to click here on title, and our title needs to be set at 5 VW. So I'm going to add my VW in here as my size. Next, I'm going to add my button background color. So I'm going to collapse my title text, and then we're going to go to our button. So the one that I need is button 1. So I'm going to select it here, and I'm going to change my background color by clicking the color area and pasting my RGBA value in here, just like that. And then I also need the same color for my border. So I'm going to come over here, click on the border color, and paste my value in here, just like that. Now we need to set our CSS ID. So I'm going to click the third tab, the advanced tab. click on CSS ID and classes, and this time we're going to change this to 3. As I mentioned before, the size of this title here can vary, so you can play around with the sizes just to make sure that you have the right size that goes with your design. But in my case, I'm going to leave it as it is. Right, so the next thing we're going to do is to add a different style to this third section. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to come over here to our content tab, click on background, and this time I'm going to go to the gradient tab and we're going to add a gradient. So the first color I'm going to add here is this value. I'm going to paste just like that. And for our second color, this can just be full transparency. So I'm going to bring this all the way down until I get full transparency, just like that. Now over here on the gradient direction, I'm going to set this to 90 degrees. And then for our start position, I'm going to set this to 50%. And for our end position, I'm going to set it at 4%. So now we can see we've just created a style which looks like we have 2 equal halves, which is fantastic. Now what we need to do is to place the gradient above the background image. So I'm going to select this option here. So now our gradient is placed above the background image. Okay, so now it's time to add our fourth section. So I'm going to save all the work that we've done so far. We're going to duplicate the third section. So I'm going to come over here and click this button to duplicate it. And if you scroll down here, we'll see that we have all our options ready. Right, so let's go into our module settings by clicking the gear icon. Right, so we're going to add a different style to our page title. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of our title here and also our subhead. Over here in our content area, we are going to add this custom code. So I'm going to paste my code in here like that. So this code allows us to have this text with two different colors. Next, we're going to add our URL for our button. So I'm going to come over here to links, and for our button 2, we're going to change this to 3. So I'm just going to delete 2 and make sure we have 3. So this allows us to make sure that our buttons are going to link to the proper place. Right, so the next stage now is to add our gradient colors. So I'm going to come over here to background and I'm going to click on the second tab, which allows us to add our colors to the gradient. So the first color here is going to be an RGBA value. So I'm going to click this slider here in order for us to get these brackets so I can add my value. So that's my first one. And I'm going to add the second color by clicking the second item here and pasting my value like that. Now we need to set our background image blend. So I'm going to come over here to our image, and instead of having it at multiply, we're going to set this to normal. Right, so now we're done with the backgrounds. Let's go into the design tab and customize our text and logo. So I'm going to click design, click on layout, and this time we want our alignment to be set to center. Right, so the next thing we need to do is to come over here to the title text and add our title text color. So I'm going to click the eyedropper tool and paste my value in here. So you can see here that now it's applied, and it's applied to the word city. Next, we're going to add our buttons size. So I'm going to scroll down until I get to button 1, and my size is going to be, instead of 2 VW, I'm going to set it to 1.7 VW. So over here for the bottom background color, we don't want to have this solid color. We want to have something a bit exciting. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete this color altogether. And then I'm going to come to the second tab and click this plus button. Now this allows us to have a different design to our color, so we can add our gradients. So I'm going to start off with my first color here and paste my value in here. So before I paste it, I need to drag the slider so I can add my value between the brackets, just like that. Next, I need to add my second color. So I'm going to click my second color here. And again, it's going to be an RGBA value. So I'm going to paste my value between the brackets. So make sure you enter them between the brackets like that. Okay, great. So now that we have this, all we have to do now is to set our gradient at 90% and also our start and end position to 50% on both settings. So now you'll see that we'll have this beautiful design where we have the color which applies to both sides of the button. In fact, the color I added here is wrong, so I need to go back and add my color. So to do that is easy. You can just go back in here and just paste the correct color. So this is the color that I was looking for. Right, so next we need to get rid of the border width. So over here it's set to 2 by default. So I'm going to set it to 0, just like that. Next we need to add our border radius. So our border radius needs to be set at 15 pixels. So I'm going to paste that. Next I'm going to add my button 1 letter spacing, and I'm going to paste my value in here. It's 1.3 VW. So as you can see here, the letter spacing is a bit too much, but you can play around with the settings that suit your design. So right now I'm just going to get rid of this because I thought that value was going to make this look nice. And I'm just going to add maybe something a bit subtle. So I'll say maybe about 4 pixels. Okay, that's great. So for the border radius, if you want to increase the border radius, you can always come here to the border radius and increase that. Okay. So the more you do it, it's going to look like a pill. So in fact, I think I like this design, so I'll leave it as that. Right, so right now we have this image in here. This may be something that we may not need for this design. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and remove it. So I'm going to come back over here to my content, click on images, and I'm just going to delete it. Okay, so now we just have the title here, the subtext, and the button. Okay, so that's all we need to add for this. So let's go ahead and save this and then do a quick preview. So I'm going to save and exit the Visual Builder. And this is our final design. So first of all, I'm going to scroll all the way down so we can see the final design. Excellent. And then we're going to test the buttons and see if they're working fine. So if I click here, this should take me to the next section. And then using these arrows, I can use these to navigate up and down. So there you have it. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and do follow us on our social media platforms. By doing so, you'll be notified every time we release new tutorials. Until next time, thanks for watching and see you soon.